Do what you want. Stage an accident. My father's voice. Planning my murder. I stood outside the executive suite, wedding dress perfect, champagne glass trembling in my hand. 1 floor below, my engagement party. 1 floor above, my execution being planned. Ruby's signature is on everything, Pierce said. My fiancé, my future husband. Perfect scapegoat. Once we're married, spousal privilege protects the transfers. Then we stage an overdose. She won't be necessary once the merger finalizes, my father replied. Senator Wallace Bell. She's an asset with an expiration date. I had 15 minutes before they realized I'd heard everything. What I did next would either save my life or end it. The silk of my emerald gown tore as I slammed through the service tunnels beneath the Riverside Grand. Industrial cleaner. Damp stone. The copper taste of fear. I ran barefoot into a storm that tried to kill me. Hypothermic. Bleeding. Hunted by mercenaries in black sedans. I pounded on a stranger's door. Dark brick building, iron gates, the kind of place senators avoid. Grant Sterling opened it. Crime boss, my father's enemy, the most dangerous man in the city. They're planning to kill me, I told him. And I can prove it. He smiled like winter itself. Then let's make your father regret it. But there was one thing he didn't know about his closest ally. 4 days later, I walked down the aisle toward Pierce. Cameras everywhere. FBI agents hidden in the shadows. An encryption device on Pierce's wrist. The only thing that could unlock my father's entire criminal empire. My job? Steal it. During the ceremony. On live television. What happened next destroyed a senator. Dismantled a criminal network, and turned me into something I never thought I'd become. This is how I survived. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, or wondered what you'd do if you discovered the darkest truth about your own family, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now and comment where you're watching from. We're building a family of people who refuse to be victims anymore. The mercenaries stopped on the 3rd step. Their advance arrested not by physical barrier, but by something far more primitive. Fear. Grant Sterling stood in the doorway like a monument to controlled violence, his presence filling the space with the kind of quiet menace that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Rain ran off his shoulders, darkening the expensive fabric of his suit. But he didn't move, didn't blink, just watched them with the patience of a predator that knew its territory. This property belongs to the Sterling organization, he repeated, his voice carrying that soft, lethal quality that made the words sound like a death sentence being read aloud. You gentlemen are trespassing. I'd suggest you return to whoever sent you and explain that Senator Bell's reach ends where my front steps begin. In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. The lead mercenary, a bull-necked man with the kind of face that had stopped too many fists, shifted his weight, hand moving incrementally toward the bulge under his jacket. Grant's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something that made the man's hand freeze mid-motion. Go ahead, Grant said quietly. Draw that weapon on Sterling ground. See what happens next. I promise you, the senator won't be able to protect what's left of you. The mercenaries exchanged glances. Whatever they'd been paid, it wasn't enough for this. The lead man took a step back, then another, his hands coming up in a placating gesture. We don't want trouble, Mr. Sterling. We're just doing a job. Your job is finished. Grant's tone left no room for negotiation. Tell your employer his daughter is under my protection now. If he has a problem with that arrangement, he knows where to find me. But this wasn't even the most shocking part. They retreated to their vehicle, the engine roaring to life with what sounded like wounded pride. Grant watched until the taillights disappeared into the rain-soaked night, then finally stepped back into the foyer and closed the door. The deadbolt slid home with a sound like a cell door locking. He turned to look at me properly for the first time. I was still on my knees on his marble floor, shaking violently, water pooling around me, blood from my torn feet mixing with the rain running off my ruined dress. I looked up at him through matted hair, trying to read his expression. His face was all sharp angles and cold assessment, dark eyes moving over me with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating a problem that had just landed on his doorstep. "Ruby Bell," he said. Not a question. He knew exactly who I was. Senator Wallace Bell's daughter, Pierce Lincoln's fiancée. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You just brought a political war to my front door." He knew something that no one else in the building did. "I didn't." My voice came out as a broken rasp. "I didn't know where else." "You knew exactly where you were running," Grant interrupted, his tone sharp. "You chose Sterling territory deliberately. You thought my reputation would be enough to keep you breathing." He circled me slowly, taking in every detail: the torn emerald silk, the scraped knees, the genuine terror that I couldn't mask. "You thought right. But protection comes with a price, Miss Bell." I tried to push myself to my feet, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline that had carried me this far was deserting me, leaving nothing but bone-deep exhaustion and cold that made my muscles lock up. Grant watched me struggle for a moment, then moved with surprising swiftness, catching my arm and pulling me upright. His grip was firm but not bruising, the touch of someone who knew exactly how much force to use. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so." "Then follow me." He released my arm and strode deeper into the house, clearly expecting me to keep up. I stumbled after him, leaving bloody footprints on his pristine floors, through a hallway lined with artwork that even in my compromised state I recognized as museum quality. He pushed open a heavy door into what appeared to be a study: dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany. What he discovered next changed everything. A man was already in the room, standing by the windows, younger than Grant, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features and the kind of vigilant posture that said ex-military or current security. He looked at me, then at Grant, raising an eyebrow. "Finn," Grant said. "Get her something dry. And bring the first aid kit." Finn nodded and disappeared through a side door. Grant moved to a sidebar, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass, and thrust it at me. "Drink. You're hypothermic." I took the glass with shaking hands and sipped. Whiskey, probably older than I was, burning a path down my throat and spreading warmth through my chest. Grant poured himself a matching measure and leaned against his desk, studying me with those unreadable dark eyes. "I'm going to explain how this works," he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who'd never been contradicted. "You're under my roof now. That means the Senator's mercenaries can't touch you. It also means you owe me. Protection isn't free, Miss Bell, and you just cost me a significant political complication. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. I can pay." "With what?" Grant's smile was cold. "Your trust fund? The Senator will freeze your accounts before sunrise. Your connections? Everyone you know is either controlled by your father or too afraid of him to help you. Your good name?" He took a deliberate sip of his whiskey. "By morning, you'll be headline news. Senator's daughter in crisis. Runaway bride has breakdown. Disturbed woman seeks refuge with known criminal. Your father is already spinning the narrative." The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. He was right. I had nothing. No resources, no allies, no currency except whatever value I could prove to the man standing before me. "So what do you want?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Information," Grant said simply. "You don't run from your own engagement party in a torn dress and bare feet unless something catastrophic happened. You don't choose sterling territory by accident unless you're desperate enough to risk dealing with someone your father would normally have arrested on sight. So tell me, Ruby Bell, what did you hear that was worth running to the devil himself? There was one detail everyone missed. I met his eyes, saw the calculation there, the cold intelligence that had built an empire in the shadows while men like my father played at power in the light. And I made my choice. They're planning to kill me, I said. My father and Pierce. They're using my restoration credentials to launder money through art acquisitions. I'm the scapegoat. Once the wedding is done and they have what they need, I'm supposed to have an accident. Something flickered in Grant's expression. Not sympathy. Something sharper. Interest. And you have proof of this? I have something better, I said. I have 5 years of restoration work that I didn't know was criminal. I have signatures, contracts, authentication seals, all in my name, all leading back to their operation. I was the fool who documented their entire money laundering scheme without knowing it. Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. Grant set down his glass very deliberately. Are you telling me you can identify every piece of art involved in your father's criminal enterprise? Every single one. I took another sip of whiskey, feeling warmth return to my limbs, feeling something else stir in my chest. Not just survival instinct. Something darker. Something that wanted revenge. I'm telling you, I'm the only person alive who can bring down Senator Wallace Bell's entire operation. The question is whether you're interested in that kind of information. Finn returned with towels and a first aid kit. Grant took them without looking away from me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were calculating something complex and dangerous. You'll stay here tonight, he said finally. Finn will show you to a room. Tomorrow morning, you're going to prove everything you just told me. If you're lying, or if you're not as valuable as you think you are, I'll deliver you back to your father myself with an apology for the inconvenience. He straightened, his frame seeming to fill the room. But if you're telling the truth, Miss Bell, then we might have the beginning of a very interesting arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Grant's smile was like a blade being unsheathed. The kind where we both get what we want. You get to stay alive, and I get to watch a senator fall. If people like Senator Bell who use their own children as disposable assets make your blood boil like they do mine, hit that subscribe button and join us. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's stand together against everyone who's ever betrayed someone who trusted them. I woke to pale morning light filtering through unfamiliar curtains and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where I was. For one blissful second, my mind was blank. Then memory crashed back. The party, the conversation, the chase, Grant Sterling's cold assessment. I sat up too quickly, my head spinning, every muscle in my body screaming protest. The room around me was elegant in an understated way. Cream walls, dark furniture, nothing personal or revealing. A guest room in a fortress. Someone had left clothes on the chair by the window. Black pants, a simple gray sweater, both expensive enough to be Sterling's doing, but generic enough to fit almost anyone. I dressed slowly, wincing as fabric brushed against scraped skin, then examined my feet. Someone, probably Finn, had cleaned and bandaged them during the night. I didn't remember it happening, which meant I'd been more exhausted than I'd realized. But what he discovered next changed everything. I found my way downstairs by following the smell of coffee. The house was larger than I'd perceived in the dark, all high ceilings and careful architecture. The kind of place that whispered old money and older power. I followed voices to the study where Grant had interrogated me the night before. He was at his desk, fresh suit, hair still damp from a shower, looking like he'd slept 8 hours instead of whatever fraction of the night had remained after I'd invaded his territory. Finn stood by the windows, arms crossed, and a third man I didn't recognize sat in one of the leather chairs. Older, maybe 60, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen things that would break most people. All three men looked up when I entered. Grant's expression was unreadable. "Miss Bell," he said. "I trust you slept." "Yes, thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. It's time to prove your value." He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. I sat, accepting the coffee Finn silently offered me, and looked at the three men who held my life in their hands. Grant leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, studying me with those calculating dark eyes. "You claimed last night that you can identify every piece of art involved in your father's money laundering operation," he said. "Demonstrate." I glanced around the study, my eyes moving over the paintings and sculptures that decorated the space. Most were contemporary pieces, good but not exceptional, the kind of art wealthy men bought because it looked impressive. But there, above the fireplace, hung a painting that made my breath catch. An oil landscape, supposedly Dutch Golden Age, depicting a winter scene with remarkable attention to light and shadow. I stood and walked to it, aware of 3 sets of eyes tracking my movement. I studied the painting for a long moment, then turned back to Grant. "This is a fake," I said. Something didn't add up, and the truth was darker than he expected. Finn straightened. Grant's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Explain." "It's attributed to Elbert Cuyp, probably meant to be from around 1650, I said, warming to familiar territory. "The composition is correct, the subject matter is appropriate, even the craquelure, the pattern of cracks in the aged paint, looks authentic at first glance. But the craquelure is wrong. It's too uniform, too perfect. Real aging creates irregular patterns based on how the paint layers dried, the canvas moved, the environmental conditions it experienced. This was artificially aged." I moved closer, pointing without touching. "Here, in the sky. See how the blue has this particular luminosity? That's ultramarine blue, but not the natural lapis lazuli pigment Cuyp would have used. This is synthetic ultramarine, which wasn't invented until 1826. And if you look at the signature," I indicated the lower right corner, "the brushstrokes in the name are too confident. A real artist signing their own work has natural hesitation, muscle memory. This was copied by someone studying the signature, not creating it." Grant stood and moved to examine the painting more closely. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long did it take you to identify it as fake?" "About 15 seconds to be suspicious. Another 30 to be certain." I met his eyes. "This is what I do, Mr. Sterling. What I've been trained to do since I was 17. My father made sure I was the best because he needed the best to make his scheme work." Someone in the room was lying. But who? "And this relates to the senator's Operation How?" the older man asked. This was the first time he'd spoken. His voice was gravelly, rough from years of cigarettes or shouting or both. I turned to face him. "Because that painting is probably one of theirs. It's exactly the kind of sophisticated fake my father's operation uses. They take a high-quality forgery, insert microfilm or encrypted data between the canvas and the backing, then sell it through legitimate channels. The provenance looks clean, the art looks real, and the money that changes hands washes clean on both sides. When the buyer eventually discovers it's fake, if they ever do, the sellers are long gone and the trail is cold." "And you authenticated these fakes," Grant said. Not a question. "I authenticated everything they put in front of me. They told me I was building my portfolio, establishing my reputation. I thought I was doing legitimate restoration and authentication work for my father's political donors." The bitterness in my voice was sharp enough to draw blood. I was so proud, so grateful that he trusted me with important work. I signed every certificate, every authentication document, every restoration report. I built their entire paper trail for them. His right-hand man had been hiding something from him. Grant returned to his desk, his expression thoughtful. How many pieces? Hundreds, maybe more. I've been doing this work for 5 years and they kept me busy. Museums, private collectors, estate sales, insurance claims, anywhere they needed clean documentation for dirty money. And Pierce Lincoln? The name made my stomach twist. Pierce was the security consultant who arranged the physical transfers. He has the connections to move art internationally, the security clearances to avoid scrutiny, the corporate structure to make everything look legitimate. My father needed his network. That's why the marriage was arranged. It wasn't about love or even political alliance. It was a business merger, and I was the asset that sealed the deal. He trusted her, and that was his biggest mistake. Grant exchanged glances with the older man, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he looked back at me. You said last night they're planning to kill you. When? After the wedding. Once the spousal privilege protections kick in and Pierce has legal access to the accounts in my name. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, needing the warmth. They were explicit about it. An accident, an overdose, something that looks like I couldn't handle the pressure. The timeline is probably weeks, maybe a month, long enough for the final transactions to clear. And you're willing to testify to all of this? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to destroy them. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften them. They raised me to be useful, trained me to be skilled, and planned to discard me when I'd served my purpose. I want them buried, Mr. Sterling. I want my father's career destroyed, Pierce's operation dismantled, and every piece of their criminal enterprise exposed. I don't care what it costs me. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Grant leaned forward, his expression intense. It might cost you everything, Miss Bell. Your name, your reputation, your freedom if we're not careful. You'll be admitting to 5 years of participating in a criminal conspiracy. I was an unwitting participant, I shot back. I have documentation proving I had no knowledge of the criminal nature of the work. I have emails, texts, records showing they deliberately kept me ignorant. That's why they were so careful, because they needed my expertise without my knowledge. I can prove I'm a victim, not a conspirator. Can you prove it legally, or can you just prove it to me? I hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? I can prove enough to create reasonable doubt. And I can trade testimony for immunity. I'm more valuable to prosecutors as a witness than as a defendant. What followed next was completely unexpected. Finn spoke up from his position by the window. Boss, if what she's saying is true, this isn't just money laundering. This is RICO territory, racketeering, conspiracy. If we can document the scope, we're talking about bringing down a sitting senator and a multi-million-dollar criminal network. I know exactly what we're talking about, Grant said, his voice quiet but sharp. He studied me for another long moment, then made a decision I could see crystallize in his eyes. All right, Miss Bell. I'm accepting your deal. You're under Sterling protection effective immediately, which means you're also under Sterling rules. You do what I tell you, when I tell you, without question. In exchange, I'll keep you alive and help you take down your father's operation. What do you get out of it? I asked. His smile was cold and calculating. Senator Wallace Bell has been a thorn in my side for 3 years. He's pushed legislation targeting my businesses, frozen assets, sicked regulatory agencies on operations that were none of his concern. I've been waiting for an opportunity to remove him from the board. You just handed me that opportunity wrapped in green silk. He stood, signaling the end of the discussion. Finn, get her set up in the East Wing. Full security protocols. No communication with anyone outside this house without my approval. And get Davis on the line. We're going to need legal counsel on this. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. The older man rose. I'll start building the paper trail. If we're going up against a senator, we need to be bulletproof. As they began to mobilize, I remained seated, processing what I'd just agreed to. I'd made a deal with a crime boss to take down my own father. There was no going back from this. No redemption, no reconciliation. I'd chosen my side, and it was the side of the man who'd opened his door when death was at my heels. Grant paused at the door, looking back at me. "One more thing, Miss Bell. That painting above the fireplace. You were right. It is a fake. It came through your father's network 3 months ago. I've been waiting to see if anyone would notice." His expression was unreadable. "You just proved you're exactly as valuable as you claimed. Try not to make me regret protecting you." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in his study. Surrounded by art I could now identify as forgeries, realizing that I'd just become the most dangerous weapon in a war I hadn't known I was qualified to fight. He had no idea the night would end in blood. 2 hours later, I sat in Grant's study with a legal pad, 3 different colored pens, and a memory that was proving both gift and curse. Finn had set me up at the conference table in the corner, spreading out fresh paper, and then positioned himself by the door like a sentinel. Grant stood at the windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the clipped, efficient language of someone coordinating a military operation. "I don't care what time it is in Geneva," he said into the phone. "Wake him up. I need those account records by noon, and I need them clean enough to submit to federal prosecutors." A pause. "Because I'm about to hand them a sitting senator, and if the documentation isn't perfect, the whole thing falls apart." He ended the call and turned to me. "Start with the biggest pieces: museums, major private collections, anything that moved significant money." That moment, everything in the room changed. I picked up a pen and then stopped, my hand hovering over the blank page. "Before I do this, I need to know something." Grant's eyes narrowed. "You're not in a position to negotiate, Miss Bell." "I'm not negotiating. I'm asking for clarification." I met his gaze directly. "Once we destroy my father's operation, once Pierce is arrested and the money is seized and the whole thing unravels, what happens to me? You said I'm under your protection, but protection isn't the same as freedom. Am I a guest or a prisoner?" The question hung in the air between us. Finn shifted uncomfortably by the door. Grant crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, until he stood on the opposite side of the table from me. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "You're neither. You're an asset. The most valuable asset I've acquired in 5 years, and I didn't even have to steal you. You ran straight to my door and offered yourself up." He leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Here's what happens, Ruby. We take down your father. We dismantle Pierce Lincoln's operation. We seize assets, ruin reputations, and salt the earth where their empire stood. And when it's done, when you're no longer actively hunted, you'll have a choice." What kind of choice? And suddenly he realized he was being played. "You can walk away. I'll give you a new identity, seed money, connections in whatever city you choose. You disappear, start over, live whatever quiet life you can build." His expression hardened. "Or you can stay, work for me, use those skills your father wasted on fraud and put them to more interesting purposes. I have legitimate business interests that need someone who can tell real art from fake, who can navigate high society without raising suspicion, who can identify opportunities in markets where I don't currently operate." "You want me to work for a crime boss?" I said flatly. "I want you to work for someone who keeps his promises. I won't lie to you about what I am, Ruby. I won't pretend the money is clean or that my business interests are entirely legal. But I also won't use you as a disposable asset and plan your funeral while toasting your engagement." He straightened. "The difference between me and your father is simple. I pay my debts, I protect my people, and I don't pretend to be something I'm not." Can he say the same? He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for family. I thought about my father's voice in that conversation I'd overheard. The casual dismissal, the cold calculation, the absolute certainty that I was expendable. Then I thought about Grant Sterling standing in his doorway, facing down armed mercenaries with nothing but his reputation and the promise of violence, creating a barrier between me and death. "No," I said. "He can't." "Then stop asking philosophical questions and start drawing the map. Time is a luxury we don't have." "Your father knows where you are by now, and he's already mobilizing his response. The only way we survive this is if we move faster than he does." I picked up the pen and started writing. Names, dates, galleries, collectors, museums. The information flowed out in a steady stream. 5 years of work that I'd thought was building my career but was actually documenting crimes. I filled page after page, organizing by timeline, by value, by the routes the pieces had taken from origin to sale. Grant and Finn watched in silence as the scope of the operation revealed itself on paper. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. "The Rothman collection," I said, writing quickly. 14 pieces, supposedly from a private estate in Vienna. My father hosted the authentication event himself, made it a charity fundraiser. I was so proud that he trusted me with something so public. My hand tightened on the pen. Every single piece was a sophisticated fake with encrypted data hidden in the frames. Total value of the real transaction? Probably north of $40 million. Grant moved to look over my shoulder. "Who purchased them?" "A shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. The money was supposedly from a tech entrepreneur, but the paperwork was impossibly clean. No way it was legitimate." I added notes in the margin. "Pierce handled the physical security for the transport. He personally supervised the crating and shipping." "Keep going." What she found in the envelope froze her in place. I did. For 3 hours, I wrote until my hand cramped and my vision started to blur. Building a comprehensive map of corruption that stretched across 5 years and multiple continents. Gallery shows that were fronts for money laundering. Private sales that moved millions in dirty cash. Museum donations that provided tax shelters while transferring assets. And at the center of it all, my signature, my authentication seals, my restoration reports, the documentation that made everything look legitimate. When I finally set down the pen, I'd filled 37 pages with detailed information. Grant stood at the windows, phone pressed to his ear again, while Finn photographed each page with careful precision. The older man from that morning, Davis, I'd learned his name was, reviewed the documents with the intense focus of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. "This is enough," Davis said finally. "This is more than enough. If even a quarter of this is verifiable, we can bring RICO charges against the entire organization. The senator, Lincoln, every intermediary they used, we can roll up the whole operation." From here on, the rules of the game changed. Grant ended his call. "How fast can we move?" "That depends on what kind of response Senator Bell is planning. He knows his daughter is here and he knows she's a liability. He'll either try to discredit her." "He'll go public," I interrupted. Both men turned to look at me. That's his pattern. When he's threatened, he doesn't go quiet. He controls the narrative. He'll hold a press conference, paint me as unstable, claim I've been kidnapped or coerced. He'll use his political capital to make this a story about a criminal taking advantage of a vulnerable young woman, not about his own crimes. "When?" Grant asked. "Soon. Probably within hours. He needs to get ahead of the story before I can tell mine." I looked at the pages spread across the table. "And once he goes public, once he calls me mentally unstable or claims I'm being held against my will, everything I've just written down becomes suspect. My testimony loses credibility. We need to move now, before he can poison the well." But this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Grant and Davis exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that came from years of working together. Then Grant turned to Finn. "Prep the estate. Condition red security. I want cameras on every approach, teams on 8-hour rotations. and no one gets within 100 yards without multiple layers of clearance. If Senator Bell wants his daughter back, he's going to have to start a war. Already in motion, Finn replied. Good. Davis, get those documents to our legal team. I want analysis on what's actionable and what's hearsay. And contact our federal connections. Find out who at the FBI or DOJ would be receptive to taking down a senator if we hand them an airtight case. Grant's eyes moved to me. Ruby, pack whatever you need from the guest room. You're moving to the estate within the hour. Why? What's wrong with here? He realized he wasn't alone. Someone else had arrived. This house is known. It's on property records. It's visible. It's vulnerable. The estate is 15 miles outside the city on 200 acres with security that would make a military base jealous. If your father is going to declare war, I'm not fighting it from a location he can surround with media trucks and police units he controls. Grant moved to his desk, pulling out a phone and a weapon in a shoulder holster. He checked both with practiced efficiency. We're moving you to territory where I have absolute control. Finn will drive you. I'll follow in a separate vehicle. If we're separated, you do exactly what Finn tells you. Understood? Yes. Good. You have 10 minutes. I stood, my legs unsteady, and headed for the door. Davis caught my arm as I passed. Miss Bell, he said quietly, his weathered face serious. What you're doing, testifying against your own father, exposing everything he built. There's no coming back from this. You understand that? I understand. This choice would define the rest of his life. Do you? Because once this goes public, you'll be the woman who destroyed a senator's career. Half the country will call you a hero. The other half will call you a traitor. Your name will be in headlines for months, maybe years. Every detail of your life will be examined, questioned, weaponized. And that's if we win. If we lose, if your father finds a way to turn this around, you'll be arrested as a co-conspirator or you'll simply disappear. I pulled my arm free, meeting his eyes with a steadiness I didn't entirely feel. My father was going to kill me. Pierce was going to make it look like an accident. I was supposed to die in a few weeks, unmourned and forgotten. Nothing but a convenient scapegoat for their crimes. Whatever happens now, at least I'm choosing my fate instead of having it chosen for me. That's more than I had yesterday. Davis studied me for another moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. Try to survive what comes next. He didn't realize this moment would come back to haunt him. I went upstairs, packed the few belongings I had into a bag Finn had provided, and looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked different from the one who'd fled her engagement party. Harder, older, someone who'd made terrible choices and would have to live with the consequences. But at least they were her choices now. When I came back downstairs, Grant was waiting by the door, dressed in dark clothes that made him look even more imposing. He handed me a phone. Direct line to Finn and me. No one else. If anything happens, if you feel threatened, if you even think something is wrong, you call immediately. I took the phone. What if the senator really does try to get me back? Grant's smile was like winter itself. Then he'll learn that some doors, once you walk through them, don't open back the way you came. You're under sterling protection now, Ruby. That means something. Your father is about to find out exactly what. But he had no idea a bigger force was controlling everything. We left through the garage, 3 vehicles, Finn driving me in an armored SUV that had clearly been designed for exactly this kind of situation. As we pulled away from the house, I looked back once at the building where I'd pounded on the door in desperation 12 hours ago. I'd run from death and found sanctuary with a man who dealt in power and violence. I'd traded my father's corruption for Grant Sterling's criminal empire. And somehow, impossibly, I felt safer than I had in years. The war hadn't even started yet, but I'd already chosen my side. Now all that remained was survival. The Sterling estate materialized out of the darkness like something from another century. Stone and iron and money so old it had stopped counting. The main house sat at the end of a tree-lined drive, 3 stories of brutal elegance, windows glowing with warm light that made the structure look deceptively welcoming. I counted at least 6 security cameras before we even reached the front gate, and the men who opened it for us carried themselves with the kind of disciplined awareness that said military training and recent use of those skills. He should have walked away, but then he saw it. Finn pulled into a circular drive, and before I could open my door, Grant's vehicle arrived behind us. He emerged looking grim, phone still pressed to his ear, his expression growing darker with whatever he was hearing. He ended the call as I stepped out, the night air cold enough to make my breath mist. "Inside," he said shortly. "Now." We entered through massive oak doors into a foyer that would have made my father's house look modest. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, a staircase that belonged in a museum. But Grant didn't give me time to appreciate the architecture. He strode through to what appeared to be a formal sitting room, where a large television was already on, muted, showing a news network. Finn pointed the remote at the screen and unmuted it. My father's face filled the display. Everyone thought the deal went smoothly, but they were wrong. He stood behind a podium bearing the seal of his office, looking every inch the concerned parent. His expression was perfectly calibrated, worried but composed, authoritative but vulnerable. I'd seen him practice this look in the mirror before press conferences. The statesman dealing with personal crisis face. "My daughter, Ruby Bell, is currently missing," he was saying, his voice heavy with manufactured emotion. 24 hours ago, she left her engagement party in distress. We now have reason to believe she's been taken by individuals with criminal intent. "Son of a bitch," Finn muttered. My father continued, his performance flawless. "Ruby has struggled with anxiety and depression for years. She's been under tremendous pressure. The wedding planning, her restoration work, the public scrutiny that comes with being a senator's daughter. Yesterday evening, she experienced what medical professionals are calling a severe psychotic break." He paused, allowing just the right amount of paternal pain to cross his face. "She ran from the venue in a state of panic. We immediately began searching, but before we could locate her, she was apparently approached by Grant Sterling, a known organized crime figure currently under federal investigation." What she said next shattered his trust instantly. "That's a lie," I said, my voice shaking. "That's a complete—" "Shh," Grant said, his eyes fixed on the screen, his expression carved from stone. "We have surveillance footage showing Ruby entering Mr. Sterling's property on Hanover Street at approximately 11:47 p.m. My father continued, "She has not been seen since. We have every reason to believe she is being held against her will, possibly drugged, certainly unable to make rational decisions about her own safety." He looked directly into the camera and I recognized the move. He was speaking to me knowing I would be watching. "Ruby, if you can hear this, please know that your family loves you. We want you to come home. We want to get you the help you need. And to Mr. Sterling." His expression hardened. "Return my daughter immediately, or face consequences that will end your organization permanently." Are you Team Ruby and Grant? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This war is just getting started. The press conference erupted in shouted questions. The camera cut to a reporter providing context. Senator Wallace Bell's daughter, Ruby Bell, a respected art restorer, was reported missing from her engagement party yesterday evening. Sources close to the family say she's been struggling with mental health issues for months. FBI has opened an investigation into possible kidnapping charges against Grant Sterling, head of the Sterling organization, which has been linked to— Grant pointed at the screen, and Finn muted it. The room fell into heavy silence. I stood there, shaking, watching my father's face on the screen as he fielded questions with the practiced ease of a man who'd never told the truth in his life. He just declared war, Davis said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him enter. He's backed you into a corner. Either you release her voluntarily and look guilty, or you keep her and every law enforcement agency in the state comes after you with kidnapping charges. He didn't want revenge. He needed it. I'm aware, Grant said, his voice tight with controlled fury. You have to let me go, I said. All eyes turned to me. You have to let me leave. Make a statement. Tell my side. Absolutely not. Grant's tone was final. The second you step outside Sterling protection, you're dead. Your father just told the entire world you're mentally unstable, Ruby. He's given Pierce legal cover to have you involuntarily committed, medicated, or worse. He's made you unreliable as a witness before you've even given testimony. Then what do we do? Grant turned to face me fully, and I saw something dangerous in his eyes. Something that made me take an involuntary step back. We move faster. We hit him harder. We take every piece of evidence you just gave us, and we weaponize it before he can neutralize you as a threat. He pulled out his phone, started typing rapidly. Davis, I need federal contacts, and I need them now. Someone at DOJ or FBI who's clean, who won't run to the senator with whatever we're about to hand them. Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. That's a short list, Davis said. Bell has connections throughout federal law enforcement. Then find someone who owes him nothing and hates corruption more than they fear political pressure. Grant's fingers moved across his phone screen with lethal precision. Finn, I want those documents Ruby created authenticated and organized into a presentation suitable for prosecutors. Evidence tags, chronological order, dollar amounts calculated. Make it so clean a first-year law student could build a case from it. On it, Finn said, already moving toward the door. Grant turned back to me. You said your father kept records, personal files, encrypted data, insurance policies to make sure Pierce couldn't turn on him. Where would he keep them? Under the floorboard, he discovered a truth he wasn't ready for. In his study, home office, not the Senate office. He has a safe, but I don't know the combination. And he keeps digital backups on a secure server. I stopped, my mind catching on something. Wait, Pierce has access to the server. He handles IT security for my father's personal network. Why does Pierce have access to your father's most sensitive files? Because they're partners. Co-conspirators. Pierce needed access to coordinate the art shipments with the financial transfers, to make sure the timing worked, I trailed off, seeing where Grant's mind was going. You want Pierce's server credentials? I want everything on that server. If your father has been smart, and I suspect he has, he's kept detailed records of every transaction, every piece of compromising information, every bit of leverage he might need if this whole thing falls apart. Politicians always have insurance policies. He's not just going to let Pierce walk away with all the evidence. And then, the gun clicked. So you're going to hack the server, I said. I'm going to acquire the contents legally enough that a prosecutor can use them. But yes, the basic concept is theft. Grant's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening further. And we're going to do it in the next 72 hours because that's how long I give us before the FBI shows up with a warrant, federal marshals surround this estate, and your father's legal team makes this whole thing about my crimes instead of his. 72 hours, I repeated. That's not enough time to. It's the time we have. Grant's voice cut across mine like a blade. Your father just put a clock on this operation. Either we dismantle his world before law enforcement forces me to hand you over, or we lose everything. So tell me, Ruby, is there any way to access Pierce's credentials that doesn't require breaking into a secure facility or torture? For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. I thought about it, running through options, discarding impossible scenarios. Then something occurred to me. Something insane. Something that might actually work if we were willing to risk everything. Yes, I said slowly. There's one way, but you're going to hate it. Grant's eyes locked on mine. Tell me. The wedding, I said. It's in 4 days. Pierce will have the biometric key on him. He always does. It's a small encrypted device he wears like a watch. If I can get close enough, if I can steal it during the ceremony? Absolutely not. Grant's rejection was immediate and absolute. You're not going anywhere near that wedding. Your father will have you drugged and committed before you reach the altar. This single decision gave him the upper hand again. Not if I surrender first, I said, the idea taking shape even as I spoke it. Not if I play the part he's already written for me. I return voluntarily. Crying, apologizing, claiming I had a breakdown just like he said. I play the traumatized, confused daughter who needs help. He'll think he's won. He'll think I'm neutralized. And then, during the wedding ceremony, when Pierce is standing at the altar and his guard is down, I take the encryption key and I disappear again. The room fell silent. Finn had returned at some point and now stood frozen in the doorway. Davis looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Grant's expression was completely unreadable. That's suicide, Finn said finally. Respectfully, that's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. You'd be walking back into the hands of people who want you dead. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. They won't kill me before the wedding, I countered. I'm still useful. And after I steal the key, by the time they realize what I've done, I'll be gone. Grant can have people ready to extract me the second I'm out of the church. This is insane, Davis said. Even if you could pull off the performance, and that's a massive if, even if you could steal the device without Pierce noticing, even if you could get out of the church, you'd be putting yourself directly in the hands of people who've already planned your murder. The risk is I die now or I die in 4 days, I interrupted. My father just told the world I'm mentally unstable. Every piece of testimony I give, every document I sign, every statement I make is now suspect because he's established that I'm not in my right mind. He's poisoned my credibility before I've even spoken. The only way I'm valuable to you, the only way I stay alive, yes, is if we get our hands on that server data and we do it before he can move against us. I looked at Grant. You said we needed to move faster. This is faster. This is the only play that gets us what we need in the time we have. But what he discovered next changed everything. Grant stared at me for a long, silent moment. I watched calculations run behind his eyes, scenarios being tested and discarded, risks being weighed against rewards. Finally, he turned to Davis. What's the legal exposure if we help her infiltrate her own wedding? Conspiracy, possibly aiding and abetting, definitely a dozen federal statutes I'd have to look up. Davis rubbed his face. But if it works, if she gets us that encryption key and we access the server before the senator can scrub it, we'd have evidence that could bring down his entire operation. RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, everything. Grant looked back at me. You understand what you're proposing. You'd be walking back into hell voluntarily, playing a role while people who want you dead surround you. One mistake, one slip, and Pierce will know you're faking. He'll kill you, Ruby. Not later, not eventually. He'll do it right there, and I won't be able to stop him. He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. I know, I said, and meant it. But I also know that if we don't do this, if we don't get that encryption key, my father wins. He gets away with everything. He gets to go on being the respected senator while I'm either dead or locked in a psychiatric facility being pumped full of medications that make me forget my own name. This is the only chance I have to fight back. So yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's insane. But I'm doing it anyway, with or without your help. Grant studied me for another long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, we do this your way, but we do it smart, we do it careful, and we do it with every possible safety measure in place. Finn, start planning the extraction. I want exit routes, backup teams, contingencies for every possible failure point. Davis, find out everything you can about the wedding venue. Security, cameras, access points. And Ruby. He fixed me with a look that made it clear exactly how dangerous this was. You're going to rehearse this until you can play the broken, terrified daughter in your sleep. Because if Pierce sees through the performance for even a second, you die. And if you die, we lose everything. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. I nodded, trying to ignore the fear clawing at my chest. When do I surrender? Tomorrow morning. We make it look like you escaped. Like you came to your senses and realized you'd made a terrible mistake. You turn yourself into law enforcement, crying and apologetic, begging for help. Your father will be so relieved to have you back that he won't look too closely. Grant's expression was grim. And then, for the next 3 days, you're going to be the best actress of your life. Because this doesn't work unless everyone believes you've broken completely. As the others began planning, making calls, organizing logistics, I stood alone by the window and looked out at the dark grounds of the Sterling estate. Somewhere out there, my father was probably celebrating his press conference, confident that he'd won, that he'd successfully painted me as unstable and Grant as the villain. He had no idea I was about to walk back into his trap voluntarily, that I was about to play the role he'd written for me and use it to destroy him from the inside. What followed next was completely unexpected. I'd been raised to be useful, trained to be compliant, taught to follow his rules. Now I was going to use every lesson he'd ever taught me to burn his empire to the ground. The war had begun. And this time, I was fighting back. The encryption key arrived in a nondescript envelope at 3 a.m, delivered by one of Grant's people who looked like he'd fought his way through hostile territory to get it. Finn tore it open while Grant, Davis, and I watched from around the conference table. The remains of our 4th pot of coffee going cold in forgotten mugs. Got it, Finn said, sliding a thumb drive into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling down the screen in cascades of green text. Then he stopped, swore viciously. We've got a problem. Something didn't add up, and the truth was darker than he expected. Grant moved behind him to look at the screen. What kind of problem? The kind where we just stole a file that's completely useless without Pierce Lincoln's biometric authentication. Finn pointed at the display. This isn't just password protection. It requires a physical key, encrypted hardware that generates unique codes based on Pierce's fingerprint and retinal scan. Without it, this data is locked tighter than Fort Knox. Can you crack it? I asked. In about 6 months, maybe. If we had the NSA's computing power and unlimited resources. Finn looked up at Grant. We're dead in the water without that key. Davis leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. Where does Pierce keep it? Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. On him, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. It's disguised as a watch. Looks like an expensive chronograph, but the face contains the biometric scanner and the encryption chip. He never takes it off, showers with it, sleeps with it. I asked him about it once. He said it was a security consultant thing, always being prepared. So we need to physically steal it from a man who's currently surrounded by private security and probably sleeping with a gun under his pillow. Grant's voice was flat. Fantastic. It gets worse, I added. Pierce is scheduled to leave for Geneva in 5 days. He has a meeting with his international clients, the ones who actually move the money. If he gets on that plane, if he takes that key out of the country, we'll never get it back. And without the server data, without proof of the financial transactions, all we have is my testimony. which my father has already successfully discredited. That moment, everything in the room changed. The room fell into heavy silence. I could see the calculations running behind Grant's eyes, scenarios being tested and discarded. Finally, he turned to look at me, and I knew what he was going to say before he spoke. No. Absolutely not. Don't even think about suggesting it. I wasn't going to suggest anything, I lied. You were going to propose that insane wedding infiltration plan again. The answer is still no. I'm not sending you back into that situation. There has to be another way. There isn't. I stood, moving to the window where the first gray light of dawn was beginning to show. My father announced the wedding is still happening. Ruby needs stability and support during this difficult time. He's going to parade me down that aisle like proof that he's in control, that I'm back where I belong. If I surrender now, if I play the broken daughter, I'll be at that altar in 4 days. Pierce will be there too, wearing that watch. His guard down because he'll think he's won. In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. And you think you can just reach over during the I do's and steal it? Finn's skepticism was clear. Ruby, he'd notice. Security would be all over you before you made it 3 steps. Not during the ceremony, I said, turning back to face them. During the chaos afterward, when the arrests happen. Grant's expression darkened. What arrests? The ones you're going to arrange. I moved back to the table, pointing at the documents I'd created. You said you have federal contacts, someone at DOJ or FBI who might be receptive to taking down a senator. What if we give them everything we have right now, all my documentation, all the evidence of the money laundering operation, and we coordinate the arrests to happen at the wedding? This single decision gave him the upper hand again. Davis leaned forward, suddenly interested. During a televised ceremony, maximum publicity, maximum pressure. The senator couldn't make it go away quietly. Exactly. And in the chaos of federal agents storming the altar, Pierce won't be watching me. His security will be focused on the threat. That's when I take the watch. I looked at Grant. You wanted to move fast, to hit him hard before he can respond. This hits him with everything at once. Public exposure, federal charges, and we get the encryption key while he's too busy being arrested to protect it. You're talking about turning your own wedding into a sting operation, Grant said slowly. Using yourself as bait to draw out both your father and Pierce while federal agents crash the ceremony and arrest them in front of cameras and witnesses. But this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I'm talking about ending this. Permanently. No appeals, no legal maneuvering, no chance for them to spin the narrative. Just cold, hard evidence and arrests that the entire world watches live. I met his eyes. You said I needed to prove my value. This is how I prove it. I walk back in there, I play my part perfectly, and I hand you the one thing that unlocks everything. The encryption key that gives us access to every transaction, every piece of evidence we need to bury them completely. Grant turned away, his jaw tight. I could see the war playing out across his shoulders, the part of him that wanted to protect me fighting against the part that recognized this was our only real chance. Finally, he looked at Davis. Could we actually coordinate something like this? Get federal agents to crash a senator's daughter's wedding based on documentation from an organized crime figure? And suddenly, he realized he was being played. Davis pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. I know someone. Assistant director at FBI, straight as an arrow, hates political corruption more than she fears career consequences. If we can give her enough to justify the operation, if we can make the case that this is time-sensitive and the evidence is credible... He looked up. It's insane, but it might work. Might isn't good enough, Grant said. It's better than what we have now, I countered, which is a dead end and a ticking clock. Pierce leaves in 5 days. The wedding is in 4. This is the window. The only window. Grant turned back to me, and I saw the moment he made his decision. It wasn't acceptance. It was grim acknowledgement of reality. All right, we do this, but we do it my way, with my people in position, and with every possible contingency planned. Davis, make your call. Set up a meeting with your FBI contact for later today. We'll present everything Ruby documented, and we'll propose the wedding operation. If they bite, we coordinate timing and positions. If they don't... He didn't finish the sentence. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. And Ruby? Finn asked. Ruby surrenders this morning. We make it look good. State police pickup, very public, very emotional. She goes back to her father crying and apologetic, plays the traumatized victim who just wants to come home. Grant moved to stand directly in front of me. But before she walks back into that house, she's going to be wired. Audio, video, everything. If Pierce or the senator threatens her, if they reveal anything incriminating, we capture it. If something goes wrong, if the plan falls apart, we have evidence to justify an immediate extraction. Pierce will check for wires, I said. He's paranoid about surveillance. Then we hide them better. Finn's people are the best in the business. They'll make it invisible. Grant's expression was harder than I'd ever seen it. But Ruby, understand this. Once you walk through your father's door, you're in enemy territory. I can't protect you there. I can't stop Pierce if he decides you're too dangerous to keep alive. You'll be alone, playing a role, with people who've already proven they're willing to kill you. Are you absolutely certain you can do this? He didn't realize this moment would come back to haunt him. I thought about my father's voice in that overheard conversation. The casual way he'd discussed my death. The cold calculation in Pierce's response. The 5 years I'd spent being useful without knowing I was being used. I'm certain, I said, and I'm ready to end this. Grant nodded slowly. Then let's make your father regret the day he taught you to be perfect. Because that's exactly what you're going to have to be. Perfect, compliant, broken. One mistake, and you're dead. Then I won't make mistakes. As dawn broke fully over the Sterling estate, I prepared to walk back into hell voluntarily. Not as a victim this time, but as a weapon. And when I reached that altar in 4 days, when Pierce stood beside me thinking he'd won, I was going to detonate everything my father had built and watch his empire burn. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. The state trooper who found me was young, maybe 25, with the kind of earnest face that said he still believed in helping people. I made sure he found me on a rural road 5 miles from the Sterling estate, sitting on a guardrail in borrowed clothes, shaking violently and crying real tears that came easier than they should have. Miss? He approached cautiously, hand near his weapon. Are you Ruby Bell? I looked up at him with eyes that I'd practiced in the mirror for 3 hours, lost, frightened, desperate. Please, I whispered. Please, I just want to go home. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. He trusted her, and that was his biggest mistake. He radioed it in, and within 20 minutes there were 3 more patrol cars, an ambulance, and a crisis counselor who spoke in the kind of soothing tones reserved for the mentally fragile. I played my part flawlessly. Confused about how I'd gotten there. Apologetic for the trouble I'd caused. Terrified of Grant Sterling, who I claimed had been kind but intimidating, whose house I'd fled from in the middle of the night because I was scared and confused and just wanted my family. The story was perfect because it was mostly true. The lies lived in the margins, in what I didn't say, in the fear I exaggerated, in the breakdown I performed with an actress's precision. They took me to a hospital first. Standard protocol for someone who'd been missing. A doctor examined me, found the cuts on my feet healing, the bruises on my knees from my original flight. Nothing that contradicted my story of panic and confusion. The crisis counselor asked gentle questions that I answered with carefully calculated responses. Yes, I'd been under stress. Yes, the wedding had felt overwhelming. Yes, I sometimes struggled with anxiety that made it hard to think clearly. For the first time, he wasn't in control. By the time my father arrived, I'd been cleared medically and declared no immediate danger to myself. The performance had worked. They believed I was a traumatized young woman who'd had a breakdown, not a calculating survivor preparing for war. Senator Wallace Bell swept into the hospital room like a man who owned the building. His expression was perfectly calibrated, relieved, concerned, paternal. He embraced me, and I let him, feeling his arms around me while remembering the conversation I'd overheard, the casual way he'd discussed my murder. "Thank God," he said into my hair. "Ruby, sweetheart, we were so worried." "I'm sorry, Daddy." The childhood name came out naturally. Another layer of the performance. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. Everything just got so overwhelming and I couldn't think straight and—" "Shh, it's all right. We're going to get you help. Everything's going to be fine now." What she said next shattered his trust instantly. Pierce arrived 30 minutes later. The moment I saw him, my body wanted to recoil, to run, to scream. But I forced myself to remain still, to look at him with the appropriate mixture of shame and hope. His eyes, when they met mine, were cold, calculating, searching for deception. "Ruby," he said carefully, "are you all right?" "I think so. I'm sorry, Pierce. I'm so sorry about the party and running away and—" He cut me off with a raised hand, then turned to my father and the doctor. "Could we have a moment alone?" My father hesitated. But Pierce's look was insistent. They left, closing the door behind them. The second we were alone, Pierce's expression changed. The concern vanished, replaced by something hard and dangerous. "Stand up," he ordered. He realized he wasn't alone. Someone else had arrived. I obeyed, my heart hammering. Pierce moved closer, his hands suddenly on me. Not gently, not carefully, but with brutal efficiency. He checked my arms, my back, running his hands along my ribs, my waist, searching, looking for wires. Finn's people had been as good as Grant promised. The devices were woven into the fabric of my clothing itself, undetectable by touch, designed to look like decorative stitching if examined. But Pierce was thorough, and when his hands moved to my collar, when he started to pull at the threads, I forced myself to react the way the broken Ruby would react. "Pierce, you're hurting me," I whispered. Tears, real ones from fear, forming in my eyes. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do better, I promise. Please don't be angry." Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. He stopped, studying my face, looking for the lie, for the calculation, for any sign that I was performing. I let him see nothing but fear and shame and desperate hope for forgiveness. Finally, he released me, stepping back. "Did Sterling hurt you?" he asked. "No. He was actually kind. Distant but kind. He let me stay in his house, gave me clothes, but I got scared. I didn't understand what was happening. Everything felt wrong and I just wanted to come home." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I didn't tell him anything. I was barely coherent, Pierce. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. I just kept apologizing and crying." I looked down at my hands. I'm not sure I remember everything clearly. It's all kind of blurry. This choice would define the rest of his life. Pierce moved to the window, his back to me. "The wedding is still scheduled. 4 days. Your father wants to move forward, show stability, prove that you're recovered and ready." He turned back. "Can you do that? Can you stand at that altar and play the happy bride?" "Yes," I said immediately. "I want to. I want everything to go back to normal. I want to make this right." He studied me for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But Ruby, if you run again, if you cause another scene, there won't be any more chances. Do you understand? The threat was clear. I nodded, keeping my eyes downcast. The picture of submission. I understand. He didn't want revenge. He needed it. They took me home, to my father's house, not the apartment I'd maintained, and installed me in my old bedroom like a prisoner in a gilded cell. The door didn't lock from the inside. Pierce stationed security in the hallway, men who watched my movements with cold, professional assessment. I was monitored, controlled, trapped, but I was exactly where I needed to be. That night, as I lay in my childhood bed, I thought about the small device hidden in the clasp of the bracelet Finn had given me. The one that would transmit everything I heard to Grant's people. The insurance policy that was either going to save my life or document my death. 4 days until the wedding. 4 days to maintain the performance. 4 days until I stood at that altar and reached for Pierce's watch while federal agents crashed through the doors. From here on, the rules of the game changed. I'd walked back into hell voluntarily. Now I just had to survive long enough to burn it down. The morning of the wedding arrived with the kind of crystalline sunlight that made everything look like a photograph. I sat in front of the vanity in my childhood bedroom, while 3 stylists worked on transforming me into the perfect bride, their hands moving through my hair with practiced efficiency, building an elaborate updo that would be photographed from every angle, analyzed by fashion journalists, preserved in wedding albums that would never be opened. They had no idea they were preparing me for war. That moment, everything in the room changed. My father had spared no expense. The dress was a custom Vera Wang. The flowers were flown in from Ecuador. The venue was the Cathedral of St. Michael. Gothic architecture and stained glass. A building so imposing that even God seemed like a guest rather than the host. More importantly, it was a public space with multiple exits, sightlines that Grant's people had been studying for 3 days, and enough architectural complexity to hide tactical positions. "You look beautiful, miss," one of the stylists said, stepping back to admire her work. I looked at my reflection. The woman staring back was flawless. Hair perfectly arranged, makeup expertly applied. The picture of bridal elegance. She looked nothing like the terrified creature who'd pounded on Grant Sterling's door in a torn dress. She looked controlled, contained. Exactly what everyone expected Senator Wallace Bell's daughter to be. "Thank you," I said softly. He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. Pierce appeared in the doorway. The stylists scattered at his presence, gathering their tools and excuses. We both knew they weren't leaving out of courtesy. They were leaving because Pierce wanted them gone. The door closed, and we were alone. He moved behind me, his reflection joining mine in the mirror. His hand came to rest on my shoulder. Not gently, but with enough pressure to remind me exactly who held power here. The watch I needed to steal gleamed on his wrist, close enough to touch, impossibly far away. "Cold feet?" he asked, his voice carrying that smooth, calculated tone I'd once found reassuring. "No, I'm ready." I met his eyes in the mirror. I want to do this right. I want to make my father proud. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. "Your father is already proud. You came back. You didn't break. You're standing here looking perfect." His hand tightened slightly. "Just remember, the ceremony is being televised. Cameras everywhere, every moment captured. If you even think about running, if you hesitate for a second, the entire world will watch your failure." "I won't run." "Good." He released me, checking his own reflection, adjusting his tie with the kind of vanity that made my stomach turn. "Because after today, after we're legally bound, things are going to change. You understand that, don't you?" I understood perfectly. After today, spousal privilege would protect the financial transactions. After today, I'd be legally tied to him, making it even easier to control, to medicate, to eventually dispose of. After today, the trap would be complete. Except it wouldn't be. Because before the I-dos were finished, before the photographers could capture the kiss that sealed my fate, federal agents coordinated by Grant Sterling were going to storm through those cathedral doors and arrest everyone involved. At least, that was the plan. And then, the gun clicked. "I understand," I said. Pierce left, and I was alone with my reflection again. The woman in the mirror looked calm, collected, ready. Only I could see the terror underneath, the knowledge that I was about to walk down an aisle toward a man who'd planned my death while FBI agents waited in position, while Grant's people held extraction points, while the entire operation balanced on my ability to play this role perfectly. My father came to collect me an hour later. He wore his finest suit, his senatorial bearing, his public face of paternal pride. He offered me his arm like we were in a romantic film instead of a carefully orchestrated fraud. "You look beautiful, Ruby," he said. "Your mother would have been so proud." For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. The mention of my mother, who'd died when I was 12, who'd never known what her husband would become, made something twist in my chest. But I smiled, took his arm, and let him lead me out of the house toward the waiting limousine. The Cathedral of St. Michael loomed ahead, its spires reaching toward heaven like accusations. Crowds had gathered outside, photographers, journalists, curious civilians who wanted to witness a senator's daughter's wedding. Security was everywhere. But they were looking outward, watching for threats from outside, not realizing the real threat was already inside, wired and prepared and walking toward the altar on her father's arm. The organ music began. Wagner, because Pierce had insisted on tradition. The doors opened, and I saw the long aisle stretching before me like a gangplank. Hundreds of guests in the pews, politicians, business leaders, people whose names appeared in newspapers and whose influences shaped policy. At the end of that impossible distance, Pierce waited, looking confident and composed and completely unaware that his world was about to end. He had no idea the night would end in blood. I took the first step, and time seemed to slow. Each footfall echoed in the vast space. The faces of the guests blurred into a mass of observation and judgment. Cameras tracked my movement. The official photographer, the television crews broadcasting this to viewers who thought they were watching a fairy tale instead of an execution. Halfway down the aisle, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows near the side entrance. A figure in dark clothing, positioned where no guest should be. Grant's people, I hoped. Or FBI. Someone ready to act when the signal came. My father walked beside me, his grip on my arm firm enough to remind me I couldn't run even if I wanted to. His public smile never wavered, even as he murmured under his breath, "You're doing perfectly. Just a few more minutes, and everything will be as it should be." He had no idea how right he was, but he had no idea a bigger force was controlling everything. We reached the altar. Pierce stepped forward, taking my hand from my father with the kind of possessive certainty that made my skin crawl. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice carrying through the cathedral in practiced, sonorous tones. I heard none of it. My entire focus was on Pierce's wrist, on the watch that contained the encryption key, on the impossible task of stealing it during the chaos that was about to unfold. "Dearly beloved," the officiant intoned, "we are gathered here today." I watched Pierce's face, looking for any sign that he suspected, that he'd seen through the performance. But he looked triumphant, confident, a man who thought he'd won. Behind him, my father stood with the other honored guests, wearing his senatorial dignity like armor. They had no idea the federal agents were moving into final positions. They had no idea Grant Sterling was watching from somewhere in this building, waiting for the exact moment to act. They had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, their entire world was going to collapse. What followed next was completely unexpected. The officiant continued through the ceremony. I gave the appropriate responses, played my part perfectly, felt each word like a countdown to detonation. Pierce's hand held mine, warm and dry and confident. "If anyone has reason why these two should not be wed," the officiant said, "speak now or forever hold your peace." The cathedral held its breath. In romance novels, this was when the hero burst through the doors. In reality, it was when the trap finally sprang. The side doors exploded open. Federal agents poured through the cathedral's side entrances like a tide. Their movements precise and coordinated, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands that echoed off the Gothic arches. The congregation erupted into chaos, screaming, scrambling, elegant guests diving for cover as FBI vests and tactical gear flooded the sacred space. "Federal agents, nobody move!" Everyone thought the deal went smoothly, but they were wrong. Pierce's hand went for his jacket. I saw the motion, saw the calculation in his eyes, saw him reaching for whatever weapon he'd stupidly brought to his own wedding. Then a single gunshot cracked through the cathedral, impossibly loud, cutting through the screaming and chaos like a blade through silk. Pierce's gun hand exploded in blood and shattered bone. He went down screaming, his weapon clattering across the marble floor. I whipped around and saw Grant Sterling standing in the choir loft, a rifle in his hands, his expression carved from stone. He'd taken the shot from 70 feet away, through a crowd, disabling Pierce's hand without killing him. "Senator Wallace Bell, Pierce Lincoln, you are under arrest." In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. Agents swarmed the altar. My father tried to run, actually gathered his expensive suit, and attempted to flee toward the sacristy. But 3 agents tackled him before he made it 5 steps. Pierce was on the ground, clutching his ruined hand, blood pooling on the white marble. I stood frozen at the altar, my wedding dress pristine white against the chaos, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it over the shouting. Then training kicked in. Finn's instructions, repeated until I could recite them in my sleep. The watch. Get the watch now while everyone's distracted. I dropped to my knees beside Pierce, my dress pooling around me like I was kneeling in prayer. "Pierce," I said, making my voice shake, making it sound like concern instead of calculation. "Oh God, Pierce, your hand." But this wasn't even the most shocking part. He looked at me through pain-glazed eyes, and for one terrible second I thought he'd see through it, thought he'd realize what I was about to do. But pain and shock had stripped away his usual vigilance. He was just a man bleeding on a church floor, trying to understand how his perfect plan had shattered. My fingers found the watch clasp. The mechanism was complex, designed to be difficult to remove, but I'd practiced on a similar model for 3 days straight. 2 seconds to release the main catch, another second to slide it free. His blood made it slippery, but that actually helped. The watch came off his wrist smoothly, sliding into my palm. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and meant it in ways he'd never understand. This single decision gave him the upper hand again. Then I was moving, standing, turning away as agents descended on him with medical supplies and handcuffs. I saw my father on the ground, 3 agents holding him down while a 4th read him his rights. His face was purple with rage and disbelief. His carefully constructed dignity demolished on live television. "Ruby Bell, stay where you are!" An agent was moving toward me, hand outstretched, probably wanting to secure me as a witness or potential suspect. But I saw Finn's signal, a flash of light from the north transept. Exactly where he'd said he'd be. The extraction point. I ran. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. The wedding dress tried to kill me. The train caught under my feet. The heavy fabric dragged at my legs, but I gathered it up in both hands and sprinted toward the north transept. Behind me, agents shouted, but they were occupied with securing the senator and Pierce, with controlling the panicked crowd, with managing the chaos Grant had orchestrated. Finn met me at the side door, grabbing my arm and pulling me through into a service corridor. Move, move, move! We ran through the cathedral's back passages, Finn leading with the confidence of someone who'd studied the blueprints until he could navigate them blind. Behind us, I heard more shouting, but it was already distant, already fading. We burst through a delivery entrance into blinding sunlight and a waiting vehicle. Grant was in the driver's seat. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just threw the car into gear the second we were inside. We pulled away from the cathedral at exactly the speed limit, looking like nothing more than a car leaving a parking area, disappearing into city traffic while police sirens converged on the cathedral behind us. What followed next was completely unexpected. I sat in the back seat, my wedding dress taking up half the vehicle, my chest heaving, Pierce's blood-slicked watch clutched in my fist. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. "The key," Grant said from the front seat, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "Tell me you got it." I held up the watch, blood and all. "I got it." For the first time since I'd known him, Grant Sterling smiled. Not the cold calculation I'd seen before, not the careful control, but something genuine, something that looked almost like respect. "Then we just made history," he said. "Your father's empire is finished. Pierce's operation is done. And you, Ruby Bell, just won a war." This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. We drove in silence for several minutes, putting distance between us and the chaos, following routes Finn had planned weeks ago. Eventually, we turned onto a private road that led to what looked like an abandoned industrial building. The doors opened as we approached, revealing a garage bay where Davis waited with a laptop and a team of technicians. We pulled inside, and the doors closed behind us. I climbed out of the vehicle, my legs shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, my wedding dress dragging on the concrete floor. Davis took the watch from my hand with gloved fingers, treating it like the explosive device it essentially was. "Let's see what secrets you've been protecting, Mr. Lincoln," he murmured, carrying it to the workstation. Under the floorboard, he discovered a truth he wasn't ready for. Grant turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something other than calculation in his expression. Something that might have been concern. "Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so." I looked down at myself, realized I was covered in Pierce's blood, and felt something hysterical bubble up in my chest. "I got blood on the wedding dress. The designer is going to be so disappointed." The laugh that escaped me was half sob, the sound of someone who'd been holding terror at bay for so long that she'd forgotten how to feel anything else. Grant caught me as my legs finally gave out, his arms surprisingly gentle as he guided me to a chair. "You did it," he said quietly. "You walked back into hell, you played the part perfectly, and you got us exactly what we needed. That took more courage than I've seen in most soldiers." I was terrified the entire time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. He straightened, his attention shifting to Davis. "How long until we can access the server?" Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. "Already in," Davis called back. "And you're going to want to see this." We gathered around the laptop, the screen filled with files, thousands of them, organized by date, transaction, participant. Financial records, encrypted communications, video files that promised to be devastating. 5 years of Senator Wallace Bell's criminal enterprise, laid out in meticulous detail. "It's all here," Davis said, his voice filled with something like awe. "Every transaction, every fake piece of art, every offshore account. And Ruby," he looked up at me, "your documentation was perfect. Every piece you identified, every authentication you said you'd done, it's all corroborated here. You didn't just give us a map. You gave us a map that matches the territory exactly. This choice would define the rest of his life. Grant leaned over the laptop, scrolling through files, his expression growing more satisfied with each revelation. This is enough to put the senator away for 20 years, Pierce for longer, and every intermediary, every accomplice, every person who touched this operation, they're all documented here. So it's done, I said. We actually did it. Not quite. Grant turned to face me. The arrests are just the beginning. There will be trials, testimony, months of legal proceedings. Your father's lawyers will fight every charge. Pierce will try to cut deals. But with this evidence, with your testimony, with the documentation you provided, they're fighting from a position of defeat. They just don't know it yet. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for family. Finn appeared from a side room holding a phone. Boss, the FBI's holding a press conference in 20 minutes. They're calling it the largest political corruption case in state history. Senator Bell is already in federal custody, no bail. Pierce Lincoln is being treated for his hand under guard, then being transferred to high-security holding. What about Ruby? Grant asked. She's listed as a cooperating witness under federal protection. The narrative is that she infiltrated her own wedding to help bring down her father's criminal operation. Finn looked at me with something approaching admiration. The media's calling her a hero. Senator's daughter turns on corrupt father. You're going to be on every front page tomorrow. Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. I sat down heavily, processing this new reality. I'd destroyed my father. I'd ruined Pierce. I'd dismantled everything I'd once thought was my life. And somehow, I'd survived. Grant dismissed Finn and Davis, sending them to coordinate with federal prosecutors, to begin the long process of turning evidence into convictions. When we were alone, he sat down across from me, studying my face with those dark, calculating eyes. You kept your end of the bargain, he said. You gave me everything you promised and more. So now I'm going to keep mine. You can walk away, Ruby. New identity, new life, enough money to disappear anywhere you want. Or I can stay, I finished. Work for you. Use my skills for more interesting purposes. For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. That offer still stands, but I want you to understand what you'd be choosing. My world isn't clean. My business isn't entirely legal. You'd be trading your father's corruption for my criminal enterprise. Some might say that's just swapping one cage for another. I thought about that for a long moment. Thought about the woman who'd fled her engagement party in a torn dress. Thought about the performance I'd just given at the altar. Thought about what it felt like to finally fight back instead of being used. It's not the same, I said finally. You told me the truth. You never pretended to be something you're not. You gave me a choice instead of making me a disposable asset. That's not a cage. That's freedom. Grant's expression softened slightly. Then you're staying. I'm staying. I looked at him directly. But not as an asset. Not as something you protect because I'm useful. If I stay as a partner. Someone who has a voice, who makes decisions, who's part of this instead of just being used by it. Can you accept that? This single decision gave him the upper hand again. I think, Grant said slowly, that you've earned the right to demand partnership. You just took down a senator, infiltrated a televised wedding, and stole encrypted evidence from under federal agents' noses. If that doesn't qualify you as a partner, nothing does. He extended his hand. I looked at it for a moment, the hand of a crime boss, offering me a place in his world, then clasped it firmly. Welcome to Sterling Enterprises, Ruby Bell, Grant said. Try not to make me regret this. Try not to plan my funeral, I countered. His laugh was genuine. I think we're going to work well together. What followed next was completely unexpected. The safe house was deliberately unremarkable, a brownstone in a neighborhood where people minded their own business, where luxury was subtle and security was invisible. Grant had brought me here directly from the industrial building, insisting I couldn't return to any location my father's remaining allies might know. The brownstone's interior was beautiful in an understated way. All dark wood and comfortable furniture, nothing ostentatious. It felt like a home rather than a fortress, though I'd counted at least 8 security cameras on the walk from the car to the front door. "You'll stay here until the immediate threats are neutralized," Grant said, leading me through rooms that had clearly been prepared for occupation. "Finn's team has already swept it twice. All utilities are in corporate names that can't be traced back to you. If anyone comes looking, they'll find paperwork that says this place belongs to a shell company's shell company." He had no idea the night would end in blood. I stood in the living room, still wearing the blood-stained wedding dress, feeling exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. How long? Until the trials are over. Until your father's lawyers stop trying to paint you as an unstable victim who can't be trusted. Until Pierce Lincoln is convicted and locked away somewhere he can't send people after you. Grant moved to the windows, checking sightlines with the automatic precision of someone who'd done this countless times. Could be weeks. Could be months. "And you're sure I'm safe here?" He turned to look at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "Ruby, I just orchestrated a federal raid on a cathedral and shot a man in front of 300 witnesses and live television cameras to create the diversion you needed. Yes, I'm sure you're safe here. This isn't about protecting an asset anymore. This is about keeping you alive because I made you a promise, and I keep my promises." He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for family. The weight of that settled over me. I'd spent 5 years being useful to my father, being the perfect daughter and the skilled restorer and the compliant pawn. Grant had known me for less than a week, and he'd already risked more to protect me than my father ever had. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for opening the door, for standing between me and those mercenaries, for believing me when I told you what my father had planned. You came to my door with proof. You offered valuable information. I'm a businessman, Ruby. I recognize the deal you are offering." But his voice softened slightly. "Though I'll admit, you've proven more valuable than even I anticipated. That infiltration at the wedding, that was audacious. Insane, but audacious. Most people in your position would have accepted protection and stayed hidden. You walked back into the lion's den wearing a wire and a wedding dress. This choice would define the rest of his life. Most people in my position would have had other options." I looked down at the dress, at Pierce's blood dried dark against white silk. "Can I get out of this? I'd like to burn it, but I'll settle for never seeing it again." Grant made a call, and within 20 minutes someone arrived with clothing. Not borrowed generic pieces this time, but actual tailored items in my size. I didn't ask how they'd known my measurements. I was learning that Grant's organization had resources that went far beyond what was visible on the surface. I showered, washing away the blood and the cathedral's incense, and the last physical remnants of the performance I'd given. When I emerged in clean clothes, I found Grant in the kitchen making coffee with the kind of focused precision he brought to everything. "Your federal handler called," he said without preamble. "Special Agent Morrison. She wants to debrief you tomorrow at 9. She sounded impressed, which from what I understand is not her usual state." And suddenly, he realized he was being played. "She's the one who coordinated the raid? She's the one I convinced to coordinate the raid. I had to call in favors I'd been saving for years, had to provide evidence that even a suspicious federal agent couldn't dismiss, had to essentially guarantee that you were legitimate, and this wasn't some kind of elaborate setup." He handed me a mug. "You made me look good today, Ruby. I told Morrison you'd deliver, and you delivered spectacularly." I sipped the coffee, feeling warmth spread through my chest. What happens now? After the debriefing, after the trials? What does my life look like? Grant leaned against the counter, studying me with those calculating dark eyes. That depends on what you want it to look like. I offered you partnership, and I meant it. Sterling Enterprises has legitimate business interests that need someone with your expertise. Art acquisition, authentication, restoration work, but for actual clients, with actual legal transactions. You'd be using your skills the way you thought you were using them before your father corrupted everything. This single decision gave him the upper hand again. And the less legitimate interests would remain separate. I'm not asking you to participate in anything illegal, Ruby. That's not the partnership I'm offering. What I need is someone who can move in high society without raising suspicion, who can attend gallery openings and museum fundraisers and know exactly what she's looking at, who can identify opportunities and threats in markets I don't currently understand. He set down his mug. You'd be a consultant, an expert, someone I trust to tell me when something is valuable and when something is a sophisticated fake designed to separate me from my money. You're offering me the job I thought I had, the legitimate version of what my father pretended I was doing. Yes, with the understanding that you know exactly who you're working for and what my business entails. No lies, no deception, no pretending that all the money is clean. Just honest work in the context of a complicated reality. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for family. I thought about that for a long moment. Thought about the woman who'd authenticated forgeries without knowing they were crimes. Thought about who I might become working for someone who at least told the truth about what he was. I want to build something, I said finally. Not just work for you, but build something new. A legitimate consulting firm, properly licensed, with real clients and real credentials. But you'd be the primary client. I'd provide expertise, analysis, authentication services, all completely legal, all documented, all defensible if anyone ever investigates. Your legitimate businesses would have access to genuine expert services. My reputation gets rebuilt from the ground up, separate from my father's corruption. Grant's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. You're thinking like a businesswoman, building infrastructure, creating defensible positions, establishing legitimacy that can't be questioned. He nodded slowly. I like it. We can make that work. Sterling Enterprises becomes your anchor client, provides seed funding, helps establish your credentials. You build the firm, take on other clients, become exactly the expert you always thought you were. For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. And in exchange? In exchange, you give me honest analysis. You tell me when I'm about to make a mistake, when someone's trying to cheat me, when an opportunity is real or just an elaborate con. You become the person who keeps me from being fooled the way your father fooled you. He moved closer, his eyes intense. I don't need another employee, Ruby. I have plenty of those. What I need is someone smart enough to challenge me, honest enough to tell me the truth, and brave enough to steal encrypted devices during their own televised wedding. That's the partnership I'm offering. I extended my hand. Then let's build something. He clasped it, his grip firm and sure. To honest corruption and legitimate crime. We're going to confuse the hell out of federal investigators. Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. That surprised a laugh out of me, genuine and unburdened. Is that what we're doing? Confusing people? We're building something new. A partnership where the crime boss and the art expert help each other survive in a world that wants to destroy them both. Grant's expression grew more serious. But Ruby, understand this. I'm not a good man. I'm not a hero. I protect my interests, I eliminate threats, and I don't apologize for the choices I've made. If you're going to work with me, if you're going to build something with me, you need to accept that reality. I know what you are, I said. You told me the truth when everyone else in my life was lying. You protected me when my own father was planning my murder. You're not a good man, Grant, but you're an honest one. That's more than I can say for the supposed heroes I grew up around. This choice would define the rest of his life. Then we understand each other. He released my hand. Get some rest. Tomorrow you talk to federal agents, and that's going to be a long day. After that, we start building your new life. One where you're the expert, the consultant, the woman who took down a senator and survived to tell the story. I watched him prepare to leave, this complicated man who'd opened his door when I was running from death, who'd stood between me and mercenaries, who'd coordinated a federal raid just to give me the chaos I needed to steal an encryption key. Grant? He paused at the door. Thank you for not being my father. What followed next was completely unexpected. Something flickered in his expression, understanding perhaps, or recognition of exactly what that meant. Thank you for not being just another victim. Sleep well, Ruby. Tomorrow we start rebuilding your world. He left, and I was alone in the safe house, protected by invisible security and complicated men who kept their promises. I moved to the window, looking out at a city that still didn't know the full scope of what had happened today. A world that would wake up tomorrow to headlines about corruption and courage, and a senator's daughter who'd turned on her own father. I'd destroyed everything I'd been. I'd burned down my old life and scattered the ashes. But standing in this safe house, holding a partnership with a crime boss who valued honesty over deception, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. The war was over. The trials would come. The testimony would be given. The convictions would be secured. But the part where I was a victim, where I was useful only as long as I remained ignorant, that was finished. Now I was something else. Something dangerous and valuable and chosen rather than used. I was Ruby Bell, the woman who'd infiltrated her own wedding and survived to claim her freedom. And I was finally, impossibly safe. If you felt something while watching, please subscribe. That's how I know these stories mean something to you, even on your TV. Take a second to join our community of story lovers. Your support keeps this world of emotions alive.